The presenting sponsor for OnEducation is Classcraft. We're excited to announce Classcraft's new story mode, which makes it easy for educators to harness the power of stories. Episodes 1 and 2 of Season 1 are ready for you and your students to play today, and it's completely free. To learn more about Classcraft and the new story mode, simply visit classcraft.com/oneducation. I think we just lost a bunch of subscribers right when you said creation.
Welcome to OnEducation, part of the OnPodcastMedia Network. I'm Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will discuss the State of the Union, debate whether Comic Sans is the right font for dyslexic students, count down the top creative apps for the iPad, and our guest this week is educator and podcaster Dan Kreiness.
You know, it's going to be a podcast when discuss the State of the Union. Man, right in my wheelhouse. It's like this podcast knows me.
That could be its own episode, or a series of episodes, actually.
You know what's hilarious about the podcast is that when the dude makes like forms coherent sentences and like actually doesn't like barf word salads out, that's like the high bar, like just putting words together.
And he's reading them off a teleprompter, too.
Right. And and the fact that he read them without screwing it up. It's just astounding to me that, like, it's like, this is what a real president... Like, again, the narratives come out every time he does something that's, like, seems even kind of sort of moderately normal. It's like, this is what a real president looks like. It's like, give me a friggin' break.
Yeah, it was that analogy of red meat. Just throwing it out there to wolves, and everybody's like eating it up, and they're so happy about it. So yeah.
Anyways, we'll come back to that. We'll come back. It is bad. It is bad. And thank God the primary season is happening because it's like the real conversations.
Except
are happening.
for Iowa.
Yeah,
we don't need to talk about Iowa.
This will be the last Iowa caucus, that's for sure. And so this is Monday the 10th. So tomorrow is the New Hampshire primary, which will be basically another, either Bernie or Pete 1 and 2, and then
don't count Amy out. Come on now.
Well, listen, I'm on the record as being a fan of about 4 or 5 of these folks, and that any one of them could be a great president. I'm going to support one until the primary is over, but I'm happy. I think that any one of like Amy, Sanders, Warren, Klobuchar, even Biden and Buttigieg would make a decent, a very good president, the most progressive platform in U.S. history, no matter who it is. So,
what about that really rich guy who's always on YouTube now? That's what my kids told me. No, what's his name?
Bloomberg?
Yeah. My kids were like, who's Bloomberg and why is he on my YouTube channel all the time now? I'm like, because he bought billions of dollars of ads.
He has unlimited amounts of money. He's exactly the antithesis of Bernie Sanders, which is hysterical.
Imagine having so much money that just your pocket change is like enough to blast the airwaves everywhere on everything, and your name is out there. I'm
carpet bombing New Hampshire.
It's pretty good ads too.
With ads.
Gosh. Yeah. Anyway, that was our political joust.
So let's actually talk about the State of the Union though. So the crazy thing in the State of the Union was, if it wasn't clear already by like who Trump nominated to be the Secretary of Education, if it wasn't clear like right from the beginning, which it pretty much was. Yeah. It was obviously clear by now at the State of the Union. And I'll be honest, like if this doesn't raise like emergency sirens for the election, like if he gets a mandate for 4 more years, this is totally what's going to happen. The almost entire privatization of education, there is a plan for this, and they'll frame it as school choice, but it's about a lot of other things, and mostly about rich people. Yes.
Yeah,
tell us about what you think about this. This is crazy.
Yeah, anytime anyone mentions the phrase school choice, we all know, all of us union people, and especially teachers, understand what that actually means, which basically means the starting of using vouchers, which have been proven to not work, and then eventually being able to fund tax dollars towards private schools. And it's the exact opposite of what we want as far as in a free society, where we want those tax dollars to be as distributed as best we can, which our model is not good right now. And everybody will admit to that. And we've talked about that on the show here, where property taxes determine the amounts of money given to local schools. It's just a screwed up system. And so we need something better there. But better is not school choice. School choice will further segregate our students and our schools, and the monies that are allowed to then be funneled towards these private schools and basically grow them at larger rates will effectively destroy public schools. There will be basically so much money funneled away. We all understand that eventually there's a breaking point, which we've already talked about. There's not really that many dollars right now to kind of go around. You pull that much more, the schools eventually will just be really horrible places, and you won't be able to keep teachers, and eventually it'll close down what is considered to be the public school. So it may seem like a far-fetched step, because this is just like one little thing. We're going to allow school choice for our parents, and this needs to happen. But we all know what that actually truly means. And I immediately, as soon as it came out of his mouth, I went on Twitter. I was like, gross. Everything that he was saying, but immediately I was just like, here's that school choice hot button there, and everybody was cheering for him. At least I was in the room, that the Republicans were in there. Yeah. Just like, yes.
Well, and like, let's be clear, this is almost entirely about religion as well. Mm-hmm. A giant majority of private schools, like that they're talking about anyways, are religious schools. Yes. And it's about homeschooling, which is also like a very Christian thing. Sure. To do.
It could be.
This is why Ted Cruz is like this is Ted Cruz's thing, which is this article that we'll put in the show notes. Like, Ted Cruz doesn't do anything, without having like some weird, crazy long game in mind. And like, this is about religion for Ted Cruz, for sure. So, and I'm not disparaging on religion, I guess, even though I kind of am a little, but like, it's definitely, this is pulling money away from public schools in like massive amounts that are desperately needed to fund
private,
far right-wing educational establishments that alter the curriculum to have more religion and religious-based ideas and ideology inside of it, like like creation, for example, teaching creation. Like,
we're going hardcore in the podcast.
Buddy, I think come at me, please.
I think we just lost a bunch of subscribers when you said creation.
Listen, if we're losing subscribers because of that, you weren't our subscribers to begin with. But I'd rather engage in the conversation than be afraid of it.
I agree with you, and I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Really, what again, there was a reason why we wanted to create publicly funded schools. The idea was that we would give everyone the opportunity to basically have an education, and with that education to be able to go ahead and achieve whatever they wanted to go ahead and achieve. That's like the vision in the United States.
100%.
Is it actually what happens all the time? No, but we're working on it. It's a process. This would take us backwards, basically, and it would start funding those dollars away from those. And specifically, even more than the religion aspect, I think is an economic or a socioeconomic factor here. We're talking about white people that are rich, or very, very wealthy people that can send their kids to these specific schools that will end up being amazing schools, well funded, and now even publicly funded to even make it that much better. And it's just not for a public school teacher. It's the opposite of what we actually believe in. So
education shouldn't be a for-profit enterprise.
No, not at all.
Call me socialist.
You and Bernie.
Right. Call me socialist. It's cool. So in the most awesome segue of all time, Comic Sans is the worst font ever.
And there was a discussion on Twitter. It started actually with the Merrills, which, if you don't know who the Merrills are, there's this amazing couple who wrote this book, and they were on the podcast just a few weeks ago. And there was this discussion, and it had to do with graphic design, because he used the husband used to be, what's his name, Joe used to be a graphic designer. You can tell the book is amazingly the way that he helped create it, his influence on that. You can see it. And anyway, there was this conversation between one of my colleagues, Audrey, and Joe about Comic Sans, and she hates Comic Sans, and he said, well, at least one good thing about Comic Sans is that it's good, and there's research behind it being good for people with dyslexia. So then I just replied, I'm like, there's research behind it? Because I had never heard of the actual research. I've heard people say that. It's kind of one of those educational things that we perpetuate. We say all kinds of things in education. Sometimes they just become fact.
Things we believe. Yeah.
Edu-fact. I don't know if you want to call it that. It's not really fact, but it's edu-fact. So I was like, I just wanted to know, is this really research-based, or is it just something that we just say? Yeah. So, my goodness, when I then posted it out there, I just said, is there research behind the connection between Comic Sans, the font, and dyslexia? And basically, where it says that it's an easier font for dyslexic students, in our case, so we're talking about students, to be able to read. And there was a discussion kind of back and forth, all kinds of
Our man
things.
Dave weighed in.
Dave Blanchard, who's amazing, and one of an amazing educator of a Spanish teacher, Dory, also was kind of they were kind of going back and forth. And really, what it ultimately made me think of, though, Mike, is not even about Comic Sans or dyslexia. It really made me think of this as a profession, we are in an interesting place. And you've talked about it, I think, in some of your speeches and some of your keynotes. We talk about kind of taking risks, right? As teachers. Okay. And those risks, I'm going to put a quote unquote risks, a lot of times aren't research based. They are anti-trend, anti the establishment, let's call it, anti what's always been done. Let's say that. And a lot of times, again, there hasn't been a lot of research behind whatever it is that we are doing. Sometimes there is, but sometimes there's not. And so it's an interesting thing as far as the teaching profession, whether we should push for that risk-taking action research, basically like learning. You see something work, so you're like, I'm going to continue to do that because it's working as far as for with my students. And then you spread the word, hey, this is working, this is fantastic, I'm going to show you how to do it, and I'm show you what my results have been, versus kind of some long game research based practices where we have multiple research studies done over a period of time, and then Hattie's research, for example, where you say this is the optimal zone of learning, and these are the practices that you should be focused on. And there's these two clashing things kind of going on at the same time. I was thinking about, does this happen also with like doctors? There's like the research, the things that do. And then there's the action research. A doctor goes, I think this is going to work, or I've seen this work with this thing. And it does happen. I think we do experimental drug treatments to things because we have to kind of push the limits.
Well, you have to do a study to find out if it works, right? That's why.
Yeah.
You know what I thought about, and we talked about this with Angie Kaltoff at Impact, was that this is happening a lot with educational robotics now, where we've seen for years, probably the better part of a decade now, that we've seen it. We have anecdotal evidence that robotics and coding in the classroom is beneficial, it's helpful, but it's time for some efficacy studies. It's time to actually put some research down. I think that there's a line, like, so listen, if there was a company that was making tons of money developing Comic Sans literature for dyslexia,
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, show me the receipts, friends. Like, let me see the studies.
Sure.
Right? If it helps people anecdotally, one at a time, one-offs, whatever, great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But if someone was like this is the answer and you can buy our pack for the low price of $19.99, then I'd be like, okay,
something's
now
up there.
it's time to show
fishy.
me. Show me the information now.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing this with robotics now, and I deal with at least 3 of the largest educational robotics companies in the world right now, and all 3 are clamoring for research, are saying, if you know people, we will give people, researchers, educational universities, we will give them devices. Like, we will give you, we will ship you robots if you use those robots to produce educational studies.
To do a study.
Like peer-reviewed journal articles about the efficacy of robots in the classroom. If that's what you're doing, listen, people, like, seriously, if you're listening right now and that's what you're doing, get into my DMs and let me know, because I can connect you with these people to give you free robots, because they're dying for them.
Yep.
And this is exactly the same, I think. So it seemed like a couple people said, Comic Sans is working, and some people were like, and Dave was like, show me. And I like Dave for that.
Yeah.
That's why I sent you a text message this morning, and I was like, I like that Dave just kind of goes, and that's why we like Dave, and that's why Dave works with us, because he's our guy. And it was great. So, if it works, it works.
Yeah. I like the discussion, and I like the further discussion of kind of where do we fit in between action research and then just research-based practices, and how do we play that as far as teachers and instructional coaches and administrators. So I think it's something we're going to be discussing further with other different topics, because there's so many different things out there. Like you just discussed, the concept of coding, the robotics as far as in school. So I think it's awesome.
So Global School Play Day was just the other day.
Yes.
I think our friend Mike Drezick talked about this on the podcast when he was on with us fairly recently, and mentioned this. This was a big deal, like hundreds of thousands of kids from 75 countries. Yeah,
it said 500,000 ended up participating, and my second grade son was one of them. And I'm super happy, super pumped about his school actually not only participated, but the entire day he told me they got to play. And I'm like, that's crazy and awesome. I am so happy. They are a school that's highly focused on academics. They tell you that right away when you go to parents, the initial open houses, that we're in second grade. We've got a lot of things to do. We've got things, basically we got a lot of learning to do. And so I'm glad they took a step back and actually participated in this. And my son told me it was the best day of school ever. He's told me all of the different things that he was able to play with his toys, play with other kids, go outside and play. Oh my goodness. I love to hear that. We should do more of this kind of thing. It shouldn't just be one day a year that we do this. Our kids learn so much, and, all those social, emotional learning skills that we talk about, you can have so many of those things happen in these types of situations where you're able to just play, especially unstructured.
Totally. Unstructured play is huge. My wife's a kindergarten teacher, and this is like the building blocks of kindergarten, is unstructured play. I don't have the energy for this anymore. I'm pretty worn out with this conversation. I'm sure that you've been following it.
Yeah.
It's been ongoing most of the day, this conversation about using games to teach tough subjects.
Yeah.
In particular, war. It was a good conversation.
Yes.
I'm drained from it, which that's how you know it's good. You're laughing because it was totally like something that like I feel like I was baited to like fight about almost. We're gonna link the thread in the show notes, and people can feel free to weigh in. I ended up like tagging some people that because at some point I needed help
Yes.
in articulating some of this stuff, because I'm definitely not like, there are people whose life's work is teaching tough stuff with games.
Absolutely.
And I think that what my points were in this Twitter conversation were just making sure that those efforts aren't minimalized, because I think that their work is incredible. And a lot of other people think their work is incredible, and it's research based, and it's backed, it's peer reviewed even.
Yes, it is.
So I think that it was an interesting conversation. We'll link in the thread, but basically we were just talking about whether it's right, sensitive, morally proper, I guess, to use games to teach things like war and genocide and the Holocaust and slavery were the ones that were referenced, and we ended up talking about a couple of other, tough subjects like rape and mental health and sickness. So we got into a couple other different subjects, and it's long, so like follow that thread. We don't have the time. We could be here all night, and I would definitely get angry at some point and break something. And I think I'm done with it at this point, but it was a really interesting conversation, and it is definitely the type of conversations that we need to just continue to have, whether we agree or not. That's what I appreciated about it the most.
I was thinking that this will be the beginning of a conversation and the question, and maybe a whole discussion that we'll have with Paul Darvasi and some other guests that we know are people who are researchers out there that are doing this type of work, and that their work has had a phenomenal impact on the students that they actually teach, and then the results that they're getting from that. And it kind of talk through that whole entire thing, because it's a tough one. Basically, do you use games to teach tough things at school? And so we could, I think a person like Paul, Matthew Farber is another one. And I was just thinking about some others that have basically made it their life's work, as you described, to use these things. And it's not, this is as tough as it gets as far as the topics. Yeah. And then how do you use the games to frame these conversations, and then basically kind of break it down, and then be able to go ahead and really dive deep into them with your students.
And we didn't even like scratch the surface of some of the other, like Jay Collins, who was using games to tackle equity and diversity in esports and gender issues. And Jean Leggett, who I ended up tagging at some point. I was dying for a window to tag her in the conversation, but Jean Leggett is the CEO of a company that designs digital narratives around tough subjects. It's literally what she does, and they do a very good job of it. So I tagged her, and she weighed in, which was so great. I mean, this is complicated, and I don't mind having the conversation, and I don't mind the disagreements. So I was glad we had it. When we come back, the bests this week, the must-have creative apps for your iPad. If you have ideas and want to take your creativity in the class to the next level, these will get you there. So stay with us.
OnEducation is brought to you by Fidgets. Fidgets are interactive USB sensors that bring your code to life. There's no soldering or wiring required. Simply plug in a Fidget sensor, write code in your favorite language, and watch your ideas come alive. Fidgets are used by thousands of STEM professionals globally and are now available for computer science students. Simply go to bit.ly Fidgets on Education to get your introductory kit that includes a free sensor worth over $50. That's bit.ly Fidgets on Education. Welcome back to OnEducation and welcome to the best. Every week, Mike and I take you through a list of our top things, from books to games, from people to ideas.
We've all been there. You get fancy new iPads in your class and you're like, what now? So this week we'll run down some of our top picks to boost your creativity in the class. This week, the must-have creative apps for your iPad. So let's get into it. So we got a list. We got 7. Some of them people haven't heard of probably, in particular the last one. I love all of these apps. I think you love all of these apps. These are pretty sweet. This is a great list. The first one on our list, the Adobe Spark app. So this is actually like a series of apps, the Spark Video, Spark Posts, and there's so much potential here. Like I can't get in, if you wanted to make like almost like Instagram style story videos, but with your kids, this is great for that. Just making little videos where kids are talking or where you're talking and introducing things. You can the opportunities for all of these Spark apps are pretty endless. So I think that these would be must-have applications on a new iPad for sure. And
I think they're free. I'm almost positive that they're now free. So just make sure you check your agreements too. I don't know if they're 13 plus or if they're under 13. So make sure you check those things with your school district as far as using those. They are phenomenal. I totally 100% agree with you. Talking about phenomenal, the one that I was going to talk about was this app called Procreate.
It's awesome.
And Procreate it does cost money, and I think it's like $7 or $8, somewhere in that range. And it is an amazing drawing app. And the reason why I call it amazing is it really it makes you feel, as a person who is not artistic like me, as far as an amazing artist or anything, it makes you feel like you actually can do stuff. Some of the stuff that you can create and do within it just blows your mind. So I've shown some stuff that I've showed it to my kids or to my wife, whatever it might be, and they don't believe that I actually did it. I'm like, no, let me show you. Like, there's all of these different tool sets. It is an all-in-one art kit, let's call it. And it's all, so it does cost money. You could produce all kinds of things. Of course, the images themselves, the still images, but you can even do these videos, these time-lapse videos where it puts together your image all into, like a 10-second clip. Those look amazing and beautiful too. Procreate for the iPad, amazing, especially if you have the iPad Pencil. That's what I would say. Another great app for the iPad that I was thinking about, my kids actually just outside of this room, I was listening to them and they're using the iPad, and the best, I think, free app that comes with an iPad, which is iMovie.
And they're right into it.
Yeah, and they're using it to create these little movies these little scary shows that they're going to show us, like 1-minute clips. They put on these masks, and my oldest son writes a script out, and they kind of go through all of the process of basically movie making. And then they show them to, myself and my wife, and they're just amazing and hilarious and super you can do all kinds of stuff creatively. And in class, so many potential things you can go ahead and do, from the filming of the little clip that you're going to do to the professional looking editing to producing it and pushing it out to YouTube or just to whatever might be your learning management system or whatever. So iMovie, it's hard to go wrong with that. It's super easy to use. It's just awesome.
And they've recently updated it, and now you can do I think you can do green screen stuff, chroma key on the iPad iMovie app, which you couldn't do.
You couldn't do that before.
Yeah,
that's a huge update.
I mean, now it's pretty full featured, which is pretty awesome.
Yes, it is.
So listen, anyone. Like when you start this with
here it comes.
Anyone who's listened to this podcast at least for a while would know of my love affair with Explain Everything. So it's on this list because I have the ability to write things on this list. And I'll tell you though, for many, many, many years, I said if your desert island, one app, it had to be Explain Everything.
Yeah.
I said that for a long time. I've been pretty consistent with it. And It's on this list because you can do virtually anything with Explain Everything. Virtually anything. You can draw, you can make videos, you can make slide decks, you can do presentations, you can just write things, you can record your audio, you can record voices, you could do podcasting in theory with Explain Everything because you can export just the audio.
Yes.
You can do so many things with Explain Everything. It is a fantastic app. It is not free, I don't think, anymore. There's
but
a
it's
cost,
not super expensive. Yeah.
but it is, and for years it was the de facto iPad app that you had to have in education, and I still think it kind of is. There are other apps that do some of the things that Explain Everything does really well. We're gonna actually, one of them is next, but Explain Everything is still pretty close, if not the king of the hill, still way up there in terms of its functionality in education.
So the app that it's in a different take, though, I would say, and a lot of people don't even know that it would even flirt in the same playground as Explain Everything. And that is one of our favorite apps of all time. Doesn't matter if it's on an iPad or any device, and that's Flipgrid. And you're asking me, Glenn, why Flipgrid as a creative thing? You know, you can record yourself and then you're obviously recording your video and your audio, but the Flipgrid Shorts app that was added, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, basically gives you the ability to do some of those things that you could only do on Explain Everything, which is basically those amazing features on the creative outlet side that Explain Everything has, which are the ability to be able to write on the screen while you're speaking, while you're being recorded, and kind of do all of these things simultaneously. Kind of a student flipped video. Student explains everything. And that's the reason why it's such a great name for an app, by the way, to Explain Everything. Because it's not the teacher explaining everything. The best part of that app is that it's flipped and the student is being able to say, here's what I actually learned. And let me show you, not only just tell you, but let me show you by actually writing on the iPad itself and drawing things and manipulating objects or whatever it might be. Same things you can actually do now as far as on Flipgrid, especially with that new Shorts app. So talk about amazing apps that come with your iPad that I think are underused, especially at school.
Totally.
At school.
This one is 100%.
iMovie, I've seen it used quite often at schools. Yeah. But the one tool that I think people they don't get it, or they don't know how to incorporate it in a variety of different ways, because they see it as a musical kind of tool, and it's GarageBand. Not only can you create music, professional sounding music, and me and you play instruments, so we actually understand that if you really break down GarageBand, I mean, really break it down to the elements of whatever it might be, you can literally do this. I'll pick up my guitar back here, and I could do the exact same things on this iPad that I could do on my guitar. And that's incredible to me. It teaches kids about chord structures, different types of rhythms. And then it allows a student to obviously to then create music of all kinds of genres or whatever it might be. And it's original music, which is fantastic. But then I was thinking, I was like, not only, we use GarageBand, especially when we're on set, on location at our different places, to be able to record our audio and have multi-track audio. And then I can go ahead in there and I can edit the audio and be able to do those kinds of things. Same thing that a teacher could do. They could record podcasts as far as their students, be able to produce it. So if you're ever like, how are we going to record this? Professionally, you can record it actually inside of GarageBand and make it sound amazing. So it's heavily underused, I think underutilized, and it's free. And my goodness, what a powerful tool as far as within the iPads.
100%. So most of those you probably recognize and know. This last one, I wanted to throw one on here that maybe a bunch of people would learn about for the first time.
Yeah.
Incredibox is incredible. That's like their ad. I just made their ad for them. Please go play with Incredibox on an app. There's a browser-based version of it. It's basically, so have you seen this before, Glenn?
I have not, actually. Okay. I'm learning too.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
I'm going to explain it a little bit.
Okay.
Across your screen are 5 dudes.
Okay.
And they're wearing no clothes, for lack of a better word. And, and when you dress them, you click on little clothing options, and when you dress them, they make sounds.
Okay.
And there's like a beat one that makes like different like
sure. Okay.
kind of sounds, right? And there's one that'll do like do 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 do, and but there's like different ones. But when you start like dressing them, all of them and a number of the other ones make other kind of types of sounds.
Yeah.
And when you start putting them all together, it makes this awesome like techno type
loop.
Track. Yeah, great loop.
Yeah.
And you can like undress as you take clothes off of them, like the parts of the outfit, like the hat or the glasses. Like the one is, sorry, I'm not saying they're naked. I'm saying that there's like one of them where you're accessories, hats, glasses, that kind of stuff, coats on them, and that's what's changing the type of sound that they're making.
It's interesting.
And as you change them, you can change them kind of on the fly, and it changes the song, right? And then if you really get into it, which is what we did in class, you can like there's a recording option, so you can record these and then download them and put them into whatever. We use them to make our games. I had students using Incredibox to make music for their video games in Scratch.
It's perfect.
Because they would download the MP3 and then put it into Scratch, and now they've made a friggin' soundtrack for their game that is like
super awesome
using Incredibox, right? But what's so cool is when you hit record and then you start, like, if you can process in your head the workflow of like what you would turn on and off at what times and at what beats and at what like bars, you can make like this amazing arrangement of music with these, but just by like removing the accessories from the characters. It is awesome. I don't know if I did it justice, but hopefully I got people at least a little bit intrigued that you're going to stop and you're going to go check this out.
I better go download that.
So there are I believe that they've divided this up into like not seasons but like years of production that they've been. I think they're on like year 6 or 7 that they've been out.
Yeah.
And like year 1, 2, and 3 are free, and then like 4, 5, 6, and 7 or whatever are like you have to pay to add on to an account. And then I think when you pay for an account, you get that downloading feature available to you. So
very cool.
If you just want to go on and like make music and have fun with it, like show your kids this. Your kids,
I'm
like,
going to.
Your kids
they got a jam.
Love this. Oh yeah, it's awesome.
I'll report back.
And I think it's incredibly underrated as a cool music tool. And if you get an account with them or whatever, it's definitely got some great applications for creativity, for adding music to things and it being your own music. So Incredibox.
Awesome. So you can always come back to this segment of The Best by checking out our blog at OnEducationPodcast.com or watching it on YouTube. Just search for On Education and check out the playlist. Want to support On Education? Check out our Patreon site at patreon.com/oneducationpod.
When we come back, we'll be speaking to the host of the Leader of Learning podcast, Dan Kreiness, so stay with us. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Our guest this week is an instructional coach in Connecticut and the host of the Leader of Learning podcast, which is now on the OnPodcastMedia Network. Dan Kreiness, welcome to On Education, my friend.
Man, thank you guys so much for having me. It's quite the honor, and I'm really pleased to be joining you guys on the new network. So yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Exciting times. Before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself? I've told everyone your name, but let's talk a little bit about more about who you are, what you do, a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks. So as you mentioned, I'm an instructional coach in Connecticut. Just actually started at a new district this year. I've bounced around a little bit in some leadership positions between Connecticut. Last year, I was an administrator in New York for most of the year. Before that, I was an instructional coach at a different district in Connecticut. And, really, I think over the past several years, devoted more of myself, professionally speaking, to understanding what it really means to be an instructional leader and a leader in education. And that really means like a leader regardless of what role you have or what title you have. It led me to going back to school and getting a doctorate. Well, I haven't gotten it yet. I'm several weeks away at this point, but I've gotten pretty close. The dissertation is basically done. My research is done, and yeah, thanks. So, it's been really, really cool to, really live practice what I preach and be a true lifelong learner.
Dan, I wasn't even going to ask you this, but now I have to follow up with the doctorate question. How difficult is it to do while obviously a family, you're running a podcast, you're an instructional coach like I am? I mean, how did you manage all of this all at once? For those of us that are, maybe thinking about it, I'm not really, but there's always that kind of thought in the back of your head.
I don't even know. Somehow I have mastered time management, and it's very difficult for me to even explain how, but I think the best way that I can think to try and explain it is, and I'm going to shout out my friend Brian Costello, another podcaster and EduMatch author. So Brian, I've heard him say this several times before, where he always talks about how the term work-life balance shouldn't even exist, because it's not really a balance. Let's face it, sometimes things have to sacrifice, and if you are talking about balance, one side of the scale gets tipped more than others, and then you got to tip it back the other way. And so I think I got as good as I could at knowing what and when things needed to be sacrificed. And when they didn't. And sometimes, unfortunately, that meant my family. I'm going to shout out my wife, Christine, who's been an amazing support, and my kids, my extended family. They knew how difficult it was going to be. And so there were times when, I just needed to hunker down and do my work. And then there were other times where I kind of needed a break from my work, and I spent more time with my family. So just kind of compartmentalizing everything.
There are seasons for everything, right? You gotta understand. And actually, I'm in one of those seasons now where it's time to go. I'm working my butt. I'm working probably 70, 60, 70, 80 hours a week right now. But there's a purpose to that. There's there's goals, and there's end game in mind, and there's lots going on. And
I mean, people have joked with me you're not even going to know what to do with yourself when this is all over. And I feel like in some ways I'm already sensing that, because like I said, the writing is really done. And outside of just a couple of tweaks and edits, really all that's standing in my way now of earning the degree is defending the dissertation. So it's just about done, and I can't believe it. It's really surreal, but I'm sure I'll find ways to keep busy after.
I'm sure you will, bro. So let's talk about Leader of Learning podcast. Maybe give us how did it start? And then can you describe it for those listeners that are listening right now that haven't had a chance to listen to it, so that they get an opportunity to go ahead and subscribe to your podcast also? Yeah,
I appreciate the opportunity. And, I think I started actually after I had already gone back to school for my doctorate. And so I learned, I'm a good writer. I wouldn't have been able to write a dissertation if I wasn't, but, I wanted to start putting out content. I think definitely when I became more, experienced as an instructional coach, and I started, kind of making that impact on adult learning, I was like, man, this is pretty cool. I'm really enjoying it. And I wanted to, I guess, make an even bigger impact than just the staff that I was working at, in my own school building. And so, I started to get connected, and in 2017, it was an amazing year all around for me in terms of being a connected educator and making that larger impact. Right around the ISTE conference, which was my first ISTE that I attended in San Antonio that year, I was also named as an ASCD emerging leader. And right around that same time, I had just kind of dabbled in the idea of putting out a podcast, and I launched episode 0, or the pilot episode, I think in May of 2017. And I guess as I got more confidence and credibility, in terms of getting out there and connecting more with those opportunities that I just mentioned, ASCD and ISTE and everything. I was like, the podcast is created. And in early September 2017, it came out with the first episode, which featured Dr. Sarah Thomas from EduMatch.
Great. And great guest.
Yeah. I just knew, she and EduMatch have meant so much to me in terms of becoming connected. And I just really think that so much of what I've been able to do over the past 3 or 4 years, I owe to EduMatch. And, it was like a no-brainer to get Sarah on as my first guest. And, ever since that first episode, I've really touted the show as the place where educators can come to find inspiration to transform education through effective leadership. And at the end of every episode, I say that no matter who you are or where you are, you too can be a leader of learning. And so, like I said, it's about bringing people on and featuring guests and talking about topics that are leadership, but not like, I'm not bringing on administrators every time, and I'm not talking about leadership practices every time. We're talking about real things that people are doing in their schools and out there in education land or Twitterverse that are really making an impact. And it is transformational leadership at its finest, even though people may not be in quote unquote leadership positions.
Nice. And okay, so you're working on your doctorate, you have a young family, you have a job, and then you decided to start a podcast. So there must be something. I think about it a lot because I'm immersed in it now, but the power of podcasts. There's got to be something that drew you to the medium itself that you thought, okay, I'm doing all of this other stuff that is taking up incredible amounts of my energy and time and emotion and bandwidth, but I'm still going to do this because I think that this is important. So what is it about podcasting that drew you there? And talk a bit about the power of podcasting for you, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's two things more than anything that keep me going, keep me doing it, even though life gets tough and things get busy. But first, I was actually in college. I went to a major Division I sports college at the University of Connecticut, and they have arguably one of the best basketball programs around, especially the women's basketball team. And in college, I actually got on the radio, broadcasting sports and basketball games. And I actually parlayed that into, not only an undergraduate degree in journalism or broadcast journalism, but I actually started out, a albeit short-lived career in, sports radio production for ABC Sports Radio. And, I don't know, I guess once I got back into education and I started really getting on this kick about, personalized learning and in our case as the educators, personalized professional development. And I started listening to podcasts, and I guess between my passion for that adult learning aspect and personalized learning combined with my interest in and limited experience in radio, I was like, this is a perfect medium for me. Mm-hmm. Plus, again, writing a dissertation, I was doing plenty of writing. I didn't really feel like blogging was really the way to go. So for me, the spoken word and that radio broadcasting aspect was perfect.
So you've had many guests on the show, including, George Couros, and it's just Sarah Thomas is another one. And all of these amazing edu type of personalities and leaders, obviously that fit perfectly with your podcast. But I was thinking about, and Mike and I have had these discussions, who would be, and it doesn't have to be someone in education, it could be someone outside of education, but be a person that you would really want to sit down and actually interview, whether it be face to face or even like what we're doing right now.
While I'm thinking about that, I'm going to mention a couple of people who I have gotten to talk to, yes, on the show, whether they're educators or not, that I've really enjoyed. I read a really impactful book, called Lead from the Heart by a guy named Mark C. Crowley. And the book meant a lot to me. And even though he's not in education, it was great to talk to him. And that was really early on, I think episode 6 or 7 of the podcast. And so I'd actually like to get to talk to him again now, like 3 years later, just to cool, kind of see how far we've come. One of the best conversations I've had is actually for an episode that's not even quite out yet. It'll be out in another week or two with Dr. Tony Sinanis, who, connected educators will probably know. He's an assistant superintendent not too far from me at a district in New York, and just a really, really great conversation there. I think that I would have to say, as a sports fan, I would like to talk to a sports personality. I'm gonna like reach for the stars here just because you threw out like a completely hypothetical question. And I'm not even like a big basketball fan, but I think I would want to interview Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Neat.
I think
interesting.
That would be
talk
amazing.
to Michael Jordan about?
I think because I'm so into transformational leadership and transforming education, I would really want to pick his brain about how he did that in the NBA. And, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, but in my opinion, he really did change the game. And, I was a child of the 80s and 90s. And so watching him play, that was like the thing to do. I remember I don't know how old I was, maybe like 10 years old. I tried to send him a letter one time and I got something back in the mail. It wasn't really for him, but it was, some kind of form letter with like a fake autograph on a picture or something. But,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, I tried. Yeah.
We've tried to get some of the primary candidates, the Democratic primary candidates on the podcast, and we came really close to getting Pete Buttigieg on before he blew up, like about a year ago. And then now it's like there's no chance now, unfortunately.
Especially lately. I feel like he's picking up steam like crazy.
Yeah. So he could be the president.
It's been tough.
It's very possible.
We've actually also tried to get Amy Klobuchar because Glen's from Minnesota, and we're trying to, pull that card, but it's
highly
not
doubtful
working.
now.
Yeah. She also did well for herself last debate. So.
Yeah, she's getting a bit of a bump too. So we've tried. Those are kind of. I mean, it's too late in the primaries.
Did you hear what I think it was? I'm pretty sure it was Elizabeth Warren said the other day. Like, I do have a 100-day plan for my first 100 days in office, but within the first 100 seconds, Betsy DeVos is out.
Yeah,
I thought that was hilarious.
That was fantastic.
Man, oh man.
That was Klobuchar, I think, said that.
I think you might be right. You might be right.
Yeah. Because
I think they all agree on that, though.
Yeah,
probably.
Of course.
Yeah,
that was a great line.
Them and millions of educators across the country.
Right.
They're like.
That's when the incompetence has ran its course, I guess, when everyone agrees on that. So. You enjoy editing. You've talked about that. You thought you were you enjoy the process of making a podcast. You're pretty passionate about it. You've been doing it for 3 years now, so you've had some time to think about this. We're in a group actually together on Voxer where it's like weedsy podcasting and discussions, which is kind of interesting as well. So let's talk about the anatomy of a good podcast, a good education podcast. What do you think? Like, I know what we're trying to do, at least, I might have a hard time verbalizing it all the time, but what are your goals? Like, when you sit down to talk to someone, like we're sitting down to talk to you, what are your goals for those conversations? What are you trying to get out of people? What do you want people who are listening to get from the Leader of Learning podcast when you have these conversations with folks?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, although I do bring on guests and I run an interview show, I try to make it a little bit less about just featuring each guest and more about really trying to pull out one or two ideas that they can impart upon the audience, especially when, like I said, it comes to transformational leadership. Because transformational leadership isn't something that has to be where an administrator or some leader comes into a school and completely, flips it upside down. It can be those little things that are being done instructionally or technologically or in terms of building relationships with students or social emotional learning. There's so many things that educators are doing out there to change the game, change the culture, change the climate. And that's really what I try to get to. Last spring, I actually was pretty proud of a little 3-part miniseries that I did on social emotional learning. And I brought on some really great guests like Brian Kulak and, Crystal Lay and Elizabeth Merce, who has the hashtag Ditch the Clips. And we talked about basically, student discipline and how to, not walk on eggshells, but, how to really bring in the emotional aspect of dealing with students and even dealing with student misbehavior. And, like I said, just try and leave people with some inspiration and ideas to maybe implement tomorrow, next week, next month that can really start changing the game, for their students, their classrooms, or maybe their school or district.
So we leave everyone with this last doozy of a question. What are 3 pieces of media? They could be video, music, books, articles, whatever. 3 pieces of media that have influenced your thinking and your work.
Wow, that's a good question. All right. I'm going to go first to video, and I'm going to go with, and it's obviously kind of cliche maybe at this point. It's so popular. The Simon Sinek Start With Why, or the Golden Circle TED Talk. I don't even know how many millions of times it's been viewed at this point, but that really resonated with me. And obviously ever since then, I always think about my why. And you guys have even asked me about my why. Why do I podcast and why do I keep podcasting even though I got so many things going on? So, I keep that one in mind all the time. I've already thrown out a book. I mentioned already Lead from the Heart, but I'm also going to throw out, the Coaching Habit, which I, read or listened to. I think I listened to it on audiobook. A couple months ago. And as an instructional coach and someone who's into leadership, it really taught me how to listen to people and ask more questions and basically shut my own mouth sometimes, which I really have learned to do, when interviewing people on the podcast as well, if I really want to hear from them and hear their story. So that's, I guess, 2. I got a video in there. I got a book, and, I would say a podcast, but there are really so many that I listen to. You know what? All right, I'll say a podcast just because it was one of the first ones I got into, and I would say, safely say that it inspired me to start podcasting, and that is Better Leaders, Better Schools by Danny Bauer. I was fortunate enough to be a guest on his show. He's been a guest on my show twice, and, that one's a lot about leadership as well. So, I learned a lot from the podcast, and I learned a lot about podcasting from listening to that show.
That's amazing. So, Dan, how do people learn more about you and connect with you, let's say on social media? Yeah,
well, even before social media, I would say subscribe to Leader of Learning podcast. But definitely to find out more information about the podcast and about me, it's really easy. Leaderoflearning.com has all the information about the podcast, past episodes, everything you would want to find, even our social media. So leaderoflearning.com.
Dan Kreiness, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glenn Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the OnPodcastMedia Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting OnPodcastMedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website at OnEducationPodcast.com. You can tweet us at OnEducationPod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting Facebook.com/OnEducationPod. We're also on Instagram at OnEducationPod. Want to support OnEducation? Visit our Patreon site at Patreon.com/OnEducation. There, you can get access to full videos of the podcast and so much more. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or a review in Apple Podcasts or the Google Play Store. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. It helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Classcraft, for supporting us. Check out classcraft.com/OnEducation to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening, stay awesome, and see you soon.